Hello and welcome to the Seattle Atheist Church. Atheists, agnostics, skeptics, free thinkers, questioning and believers, whatever you call yourselves, you are welcome here. And now our creed. The Seattle Atheist Church was founded on the principles of scientific naturalism and secular ethics, which commits us, on the one hand, to reason and evidence-based thinking, on the other hand, to compassion for our fellow human beings. These commitments motivate us to oppose magical and wishful thinking and all forms of dogma, as well as to stand firmly against all forms of prejudice. Truth claims are attempted here, and we stand ready to revise our thinking in light of new information. We attempt to be excellent to all other conscious beings. We believe in good because good works in non-mysterious ways. If that sounds good to you, then you're in the right place. Okay, on with today's talk. Here at the Seattle Atheist Church, the members ourselves give the talks. We have a planning meeting every quarter that's open to the whole community, where we brainstorm ideas for talks we'd like to hear and talks we'd like to give. Then we vote on the ideas and schedule the talks to get the most votes that get the most votes. For today, please join me in welcoming Yashar to give a talk about the unfounded prejudice and hate speech against millennials.
Thank you very much. All right, so I have and thank you all for having me. I have a PowerPoint presentation essentially prepared, which I'm going to be presenting via share screen. I assume at this point everybody can see this. If you can't, let me know. And then I'm curious, can you guys see my cursor? I guess Emma, you should be the de facto question answerer. Can you see my cursor where I'm pointing?
Yep.
Okay.
I can see it.
Can you see this control bar that my cursor is over in it right now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So there's a chance that might block a few things. Let's see, am I able to move this? Okay, it'll only block, it'll block some links which you can get to on your own later. So
I'm also seeing that there's kind of a thing blocking on the right-hand side in the top that might be a Zoom window.
Okay, I will get rid of that. I do want to share, sorry, I'm going to stop share real quick. And my intention was, so I shared the link to that presentation on the meetup page for this specific event. And I just dropped it into the Zoom chat. So what I did here is, I started preparing for this presentation and started a document where I was making notes. And now that document is like 10 pages long. So it's far more than what I would probably actually put into a presentation for a group like this. But in this presentation, a lot of the slides have links in them that is often referencing the source material for the content of that slide. You can follow up, read those articles or those government pages and things of that nature on your own if it's something that interests you, or if you question the data, you can have a look at it for yourself and then of course go down the internet rabbit hole of various references. Okay, so I moved that box up over here. It should be mostly out of the way. Does that look good? Everybody can see this? Or can anybody not see stuff at this point? All right, I will take that as being good. Okay, so the unfounded popularity of hate speech against millennials. So what I found in the last decade or so is lots of articles and opinion pieces about how millennials are this and that, and how they are shaping society for the negative. And then, of course, that has bled from, maybe the realm of journalism and the media into now social media. And I want to examine it and see, where does this information come from? Is it founded or unfounded? Perhaps the title gives it away a bit here. And then discuss kind of the nature of this speech, of these claims themselves about what millennials are doing. So I'm curious, I'd like to include a little part audience participation in the presentation, if that's okay, and we'll try and make it fairly seamless. I'm curious, is anyone immediately looking at this picture, does anybody see anything wrong with this picture that they think they'd like to share?
I do.
What do you see?
Well, that the most important thing in the room, I think, is the painting, and everybody's ignoring it.
Yeah, and what do you think they're doing instead?
Probably texting directly to the person they're sitting next to, or some other friend.
Yeah.
I assume.
All right, perfect. We'll come back to this picture. Oh, and yeah, one thing I'm trying to do here is really discuss whether or not the claims against millennials are valid and back that with data. I'm going to do my best to stay out of what generation is worse, generation wars, who, you know, isolating a problem in society and determining which generation's fault it is. Mostly I'm just going to try and, you know, address specific claims or a broad range of claims levied against millennials. So to start the presentation, you're going to possibly feel some feelings throughout this presentation, and that's part of the intention. I'm going to do some internet memes here. I'm curious. Here's an internet meme. I don't think it's blocked for you in terms of the text. I'd be curious. Go ahead and read it on your own. If anybody has any thoughts, how does this meme make you feel? Perhaps one person would like to share.
I'm seeing it blocked at the top of the screen.
All right, there we go. Is that good?
That's better.
A little, but we can also look at the PDF that you had us open.
Okay. I hate this bar. Okay. All right, that lets you see the whole thing. Okay, does anybody have any feelings about this meme? Do you like it? You think it's funny?
It's kind of weird.
How so?
It's like how, I don't know, it just feels like you have to hate your partner to make a meme like that. Like, why would you marry somebody that you dislike that much?
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, I would say, so in case it's not clear, the meme is suggesting that women today are uppity in a way that women in previous generations were not. And if women, 40 years ago acted that way, they would get a beating, while women today do not. In case that wasn't clear, that's essentially what this meme is saying. Here is essentially the same meme expressed in a different way. Does anybody have any feelings they'd like to share about that?
Yashar, I don't see the other meme.
Yes, okay. You had your chance with the other meme. We're on to the next one. Do you need to see it?
Well, I mean, I saw the one with the duck, but I don't see this.
We're not
asking us to look at.
Are you reading the text of this meme?
You can't see it.
There's lots, but the slides you sent.
Are you guys looking at my share screen or something else?
Yeah, we're looking at the shared screen. We just see a white blank thing on the left side of the screen.
I think what's confusing people is that the meme on the right side had the text changed to be the new meme. And there's not a meme on the left.
Oh, thank you, Brian.
Yes, that is what was.
Yeah, please read the meme and tell me how you feel about it.
Okay.
I can't see it though.
Okay, I'll read it. The meme says, what would happen if a black person talked to a white person back in the day the way blacks talk to whites these days? And the image is of Daffy Duck, likely after having his beak dynamited off by Bugs Bunny. And again, the implication is that uppity black people, the way they behave today, would receive a beating or worse back in the day. Does everybody get that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or feelings they'd like to share?
Yeah, I just want to say, you've said it several times. I would ask you not to use the word uppity. That's a derogatory term.
That's precisely why I'm using it, so that you can understand how derogatory this meme is. Does everybody get that?
Yes, yes.
Because the point of this meme is that this is not actually a meme. This is the meme. So the meme says, what would happen if I talked to my parents the way kids talk to their parents these days? And again, it's a image of Daffy Duck with his beak or bill having been blown off, which suggests that young people these days, the way that they behave, using the U word, is inappropriate and would have justified a beating back in the day. And that's...
Sorry. Yeah, sir. I'm still really confused about you using the word uppity to describe anybody.
I think that's part of the point, Kathleen, is that uppity is a judgment. But what I don't see is, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what the point you're trying to get across, Yashar. And are you saying that because the millennials, that we all, those of us who are older than millennials, and I'm not sure which age range is millennials, those of which are who are older, use values that were so enculturated at the time we were kids that we judge without thinking. Kids that have, at least in this instance, I think have a better perception. Although I don't have kids, so I don't know what it's like to be talked back to. But you're saying there are different cultural norms for different age groups?
No, I'm saying here are memes advocating for physical abuse against specific demographics of people. How does that make you feel?
Bad.
Yeah, exactly. And the point I'm making is the first two memes are ones I generated by taking this meme about young people and modifying it to make the same or make a similar statement about other demographics. And the point I'm making is, why is it that when we are seeing these articles online and seeing these memes, why are these articles and these memes allowed to be on the internet, when if there were memes advocating for physically abusing your spouse or assaulting Black people, I don't think we would accept that, would we? Do you guys think you would accept that? Rhetorical question.
No.
So this meme was actually posted by a friend of mine, and here are the responses. Eric Woods is not my friend. My friend reposted it from Eric Woods. Who knows how many people posted it before it got to my friend? But here are the responses and I've highlighted a few. One says, "We should have never stopped," referring to beating your children. And another one says, "Still goes," according, in reference to disciplining your children with what we would accurately label as physical abuse. So we're seeing these memes on the internet and people are advocating for them. They're saying, yes, let's do this. And you might look at it and say, well, it's a joke, it's funny. I don't see anything funny about it. And I don't know that it would be right to call this funny. So part of my point is, why are we seeing this hate speech proliferated against one demographic when if it was levied against other demographics, we wouldn't stand for it, right? We would click the report button. We would say that this is inciting violence against the demographic. It's saying we should, be assaulting or otherwise hurting specific demographics. And yet when it comes to young people, we don't see this very much. We see the opposite. We see people advocating for it. And then at the bottom, it says, this was posted by my friend who is actually a female person of color, homosexual millennial, and the child of immigrants. So I think this is very relevant, because if we had the meme say this against any of those other demographics, which she belongs to, we would all be up in arms, wouldn't we? I think, well, rightfully so.
Right.
So here's some housekeeping.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So the age of millennials is beyond the age range now where they have the relationship of a parent and a child. So I don't think that there's a strong comparison between historical oppression based on gender or race and corporal punishment and parenting styles. It is no longer something someone can do. So maybe we can discuss that more, but I have an objection based on that.
Yeah, let's hold questions from here on until the end then. And I can always go back to slides if anybody has a question about specific slides.
Okay.
So some housekeeping. You've already heard me use some of these key terms. Millennials, young people, technically they're meant to be Generation Y, who are approximately 39 or 40 years old at this point and younger. What we've seen and what I'll kind of demonstrate throughout the presentation is that millennial has now become kind of this all-encompassing umbrella term for younger people, i.e. Generation Y and Generation Z, who are the youngest kind of, or the younger generation now. So I'll kind of continue to use millennial to be synonymous with young people, and young people or younger people to be synonymous with millennial, because I want to address the entire issue of prejudice, not just against Generation Y, but also Generation Z and their behaviors. POC, people of color, I used once or twice. If you don't know what that is, essentially people with darker skin, black or brown. Hate speech, public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. I took this from Cambridge Dictionary. My question is, why does that not include a demographic such as age, when again we're seeing a lot of hate speech that meets this definition, where, as I just showed in the previous meme, people are encouraging in public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person based on something such as, in this case, being age. So why are we not including this in our notion of hate speech? And then an important, while I'm advocating against hate speech, I want to make the distinction that there has been this misconception that hate speech is illegal when it actually is not. So if you all remember, there's that guy, Mio, I forget his last name, but he had a Greek last name.
Yes. Ian something.
He came and spoke at UW, I think a year or two ago, and lots of people said the president should shut this down. He shouldn't allow this because it's hate speech and therefore it's illegal. Those people were incorrect. Was it hate speech? Likely. I'm not here to say whether or not it was. He was speaking essentially against gay rights, which I'm personally for gay rights. We don't need to debate those now. But a lot of people said that this should be shut down because it's hate speech and hate speech is illegal. It is, as far as I can tell, it is not illegal. Whether or not it should be illegal, you can determine on your own. That is another discussion. It is illegal in some countries. A few more key terms: narcissism, a personality disorder, key traits of which include an inflated sense of their own importance, deep need for excessive attention and admiration, troubled relationships, lack of empathy for others. But behind this mask of extreme confidence lies a fragile self-esteem that's vulnerable to the slightest criticism. That I've taken from the Mayo Clinic website as linked there. All right, now we can delve a little bit more into kind of millennials. Who are they? What is the definition? As I mentioned, Generation Y, born more or less from 1981 to 96. I think I took that off of either Pew Research or Hughes and Strauss. As I mentioned, there's other ranges. It really doesn't matter. It's essentially, we can say it's 1980 to 2000, 1980 to 99. Doesn't matter. Essentially people who are about 39 or 40 years younger right now. You can get the general idea. I didn't want to fuss about it. And then as I mentioned, this is becoming millennials become an umbrella term. And then of course I got this date range from Pew. And then the term millennial itself is coined by Howe and Strauss in 91. You can read more about them if you'd like. Here's a meme, a less technical definition of generations. What is a boomer or a baby boomer? Anyone older than you that you don't like. What's a millennial? Anyone younger than you that you don't like. And this is part of, where we're getting into the pandemonium and the hate. If I don't like them, I need to label them and hate the whole entire segment, the whole entire generation. And that includes people older than me, not just people younger than me. And hopefully you can see where this is getting problematic if you didn't see it before. And here's just a fun meme. You're a millennial and you're a millennial. Anyone younger than me is a millennial. And the person who had posted this meme commented, I posted this article, and judging by the comments that I got, it seemed that most people thought Generation X is actually millennial. So Generation X being the generation who were adults in the 90s that came before millennials, right? It goes XYZ, of course, you know that. And while we're having a little bit of, while we're exploring some memes and stereotypes against millennials, if you haven't heard it, I mean, if you haven't heard it, that's great. You've kept out of the fray and the muck, but here are some of the things said against millennials. They're lazy, they don't want to work, they're dumb, they don't know anything, they're stupid, they're entitled, they want everything handed to them, and they've ruined everything. If you haven't heard this, they've ruined this, they've killed that. Like constantly there's articles about millennials killed this, killed that, they're killing our way of life. Millennials are sitting on the couch watching Netflix and expecting a promotion, and they're lazy and fat. Here's an article about how millennials killed mayonnaise. Oh my God, no. Blame millennials for the vanishing bar of soap. Is there nothing you filthy millennials cannot ruin? Here's a fun meme. How many millennials does it take to change a light bulb? None. The light bulb now identifies as a flower vase, and you are being charged with a hate crime. And this is to say, this meme is saying millennials are overly sensitive snowflakes. And this is, of course, also engaging in some rhetoric regarding the way people identify, including things like gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, these sorts of things. So you can see they're kind of getting lumped into each other now, these various demographics, which also experience hate speech, prejudice, and discrimination. Millennials, I will not say the R word, but an R word with degrees and zero common sense. Millionaire to millennials, stop buying avocado toast if you want to buy a home, which I would say millennials to millionaires, stop exploiting people's labor and pay them fair wages. Also, before avocado toast became the hot new brunch item, I think it was things like steak and eggs, which cost more, have a higher carbon footprint, exploit labor all along the world. I'm not saying avocado toast doesn't. And also steak and eggs is less healthy for you. So I'm not sure what the problem is with avocado toast, but apparently that makes millennials bad. Here's the Duke, I believe he's known as, Clint Eastwood. I mean, I don't know if he actually said this, but it's a meme. A message to all millennials. Your name is the only thing you've been given. You want something else? Better get off your entitled ASS and earn it, Buttercup. And of course, we all know that he is a mascot for a reason and an excellent hero to mimic Clint Eastwood. I'm glad you're laughing. All right, so one of the things that has been said is millennials are narcissists, that they are self-interested, as we explored the Mayo Clinic definition of narcissism. One of the popular pieces of literature that came out in 2014 is this book by Dr. Jean Twenge. She is a professor of psychology at San Diego State, I believe it is, or San Diego University, I forget, San Diego. In order to make this claim that millennials are narcissists, she uses what's known as NPI, the Narcissistic Personality Inventory, which is essentially a test a psychologist might give an individual to assess their level of narcissism. And she used information from this test to make the claim that millennials are more narcissistic than previous generations, and she even says that they are the most narcissistic generation. And her and many others have claimed that there is a narcissism epidemic, that narcissism is growing, and of course has culminated with millennials or young people, generations generations Y and Z. She herself is Generation X, born 1975, has 3 daughters. I didn't, bother to look up their ages, but I'm assuming they are millennial-ish, possibly Z. Here is a review of the book. And I mentioned the people who had coined the term millennial was Neil Howe and William Strauss. So here's a review from Publishers Weekly that the book received in their 2000 book, Millennials Rising. Neil Howe and William Strauss argued that children born after 1982 will grow to become America's next greatest generation, which is to say that they will rival boomers, of course, who are known as the greatest generation. filled with a sense of optimism and civic duty, but according to San Diego State psychology professor Twenge, such predictions are wishful thinking. Lumping together Gen X and Gen Y under the moniker Gen Me, Twenge argues that those born after 1971 are more self-centered, more disrespectful of authority, and more depressed than ever before. And of course, oh no, disrespectful of authority. Hopefully none of us here are disrespectful of Trump or the White House or any politician or anybody else in authority, because that would be terrible. Young people should definitely not be doing that, ever. And of course, you see in this review, she's that they said that she's lumping Gen X and Gen Y together. Those born after 1970, which I feel like is already problematic. Gen Y, and I'm not really advocating for hard borders around generations. I would say the definition of generations is already problematic when we're lumping people together. Gen X started around 1965. She decided to make this argument for people starting around 1970, which again seems arbitrary. So she's kind of picked a certain portion of Gen X and then lump them together with Gen Y. It seems kind of convenient, I would say. Yeah, here's Gen X. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the issues I have with this book. I will show you the one that was leering to me is the cover. I would be curious, real quick, would anybody share, do they have any issues with this cover? Anybody? I'll tell you what my issue is. What I see of this cover is an adult person using what I am seeing as a sexualized body of a young female in order to sell her books. And I would say that that itself is highly narcissistic. Because of course, putting this image on a book cover is going to get people's glances, whether on the bookshelf or on Amazon.
You need to remember that the author most often doesn't have control over the cover. It's a separate person that's hired to create that, and that may not have been her preference, just so you know.
I appreciate that. Doesn't justify it, doesn't make it okay, but that is a completely fair point if it wasn't her decision. But yeah.
I'm not sure when sex was not used to sell. If you can tell me when that ever happened and when women's bodies were not used to sell products.
Do you think is your point to say that it's justified, or what's your point? You think it's
my point is to point out one thing when historically through all time women's bodies were used in a sexual way to sell.
Right, I get that. And then what are you trying to say when you say that? Is this a good thing? Is that a bad thing that women's bodies have been used?
Well, I think
it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never been good.
Yeah.
It's never been good, and that it's not good now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never heard anybody talk very deeply on this. So
that's Yasser's point, Kathleen.
Yeah, so we're on the same page, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Part of it is the hypocrisy of saying that other people are narcissistic, but I'm going to use people's bodies in order to make my own, fame and fortune. My point is that the hypocrisy of the book itself, whether the author chose the page, the imagery or not, regardless. Okay, we're going to move on here.
Oh, I was just going to add that it also adds to the stereotype of millennials getting a lot of tattoos and stuff.
Yeah.
Because it shows off, what they want to show off, and so that's considered narcissistic by older generations.
Yeah, that's definitely what the cover was trying to go for, was how the millennials' body itself is an analog for how narcissistic they are. Yeah.
Hey, Yashar, I gotta say, part of the tension I'm feeling right now is I'm confused about whether we're in discussion, because I'd like to just kind of hear your talk and then move into discussion.
Yeah,
that's where I'm just feeling a little confusion, because I don't want to interrupt you, but I feel like our discussion is sort of happening simultaneous to the talk. I'm a little confused about the format that's happening.
As I said in the beginning, if we can hold questions and comments until afterwards, but I will ask for participant for audience participation, as is often the case with presentations.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's fine. But yeah, when I ask for a specific question or comment, please don't take that as a time to waylay the presentation with comments about something else. We can hold those later. Continuing on with the topic of narcissism. So the critique of the book, as I started to research it, is that Twenge, the author, uses the NPI, the Narcissistic Personality Inventory. And when I did some research into what this system is and how it's used and how it was used to compare previous generations to the current one, since that was the author's claim, is that millennials are the most narcissistic and they're more narcissistic than previous generations, I discovered that this system was developed in 1979. In 1979, it was when Gen X was ending in terms of their birth rates, and Gen Y, i.e. millennials, was starting. By this time, the oldest Gen Xer, who was born in 1965, was 14 years old. So how it is that Twenge can take data about people using methodology that was developed after a lot of them were born, or just around when some of them were born, and then say that this data shows that they are more narcissistic than previous generations for whom we don't have data or comparable data to. I'm not sure how this could be seen as a legitimate claim. And even when this system was developed in 1979, I don't know how widespread it was used. So how much of Gen X was subjected to this kind of testing to measure their rates of narcissism is difficult to say. And then of course anybody who was adult or beyond early adulthood, we couldn't make any claims about how narcissistic they were as children or as teenagers or as young adults. So I think that's a pretty big problem there. And then in reference to her notion of kind of the rise in narcissism and how it's something kind of especially prevalent or problematic with millennials, the fact is that her assertions are nothing new. Here's a book called The Culture of Narcissism: American Life in an Age of Diminishing Expectations. This was written in 1991, which is to say it was written about the boomer generation. And then here's another book written about the boomer generation, A Generation of Sociopaths: How the Baby Boomers Betrayed America. And then this was written 3 years after Twenge's book. And I'm not here to say that it's boomers who are the narcissists or the sociopaths, but my point is that this is part of the generation war, that everyone's just pointing fingers at whoever they can. And frankly, a lot of them are doing it to make a buck selling a book, or to get clicks on their online articles, or to sell their magazines and newspapers, or to just gain notoriety. And I personally find that pretty problematic. And also this just suggests that maybe we're just all narcissistic. I mean, we're all flawed, right? Often when we talk about personality flaws, we find that a lot of us have them. And doesn't mean, we're evil and that we're out actively hurting everybody. We're all flawed. And we have seen ourselves as being flawed for a long time. So back to this, of course, here's a bunch of millennials ignoring Rembrandt painting, which, as far as we're told, is a masterpiece, and we should be appreciating of it. I'm not sure who decides that. And part of the problem, of course, is that these are not millennials. These are Gen Z. They're not Gen X. But again, they've been lumped together. So anybody young doing something I don't like is a millennial. This was originally on Twitter. Somebody who was at the museum saw these young people looking at their phones, posted this. Does anybody believe they're Googling Rembrandt? Nope, neither do I. But the question is why? So here's a professor, I forget what she's a professor of where, but here's a response to this. What's wrong with this picture? Nothing's wrong with this picture since we don't know what the backstory is, says Katrina Ray Salas. They could be contacting their parents after spending hours there. They could be reading about this history, the history of the art on the museum website. We assume too much if we're upset, and that's part of the problem. We see millennials doing something, we don't know what they're doing, we don't understand what they're doing, and too often our prejudice kicks in and just kind of wants to lay some sort of accusation at their feet, and that is, of course, that is the definition of prejudice. And here's a response from a teacher that said, FYI, these kids use the iPhones as part of the tour of the museum. It was an app. And that's exactly the point. These kids were doing exactly what they should have been doing, or at least what has been suggested they should be doing, which is to say engaging with the art and learning about it. They were just doing it in a way that is different for their generation. And there's no right or wrong way to do it. Everyone is allowed to experience the museum their own way. And quite frankly, anybody at the museum who doesn't want to enjoy it, that's their choice. It's no one else's choice. And museums are already hurting for patronage. So, you know, to say that we shouldn't be taking kids out to the museum because it's a waste of time or something like that seems a little bit like it's going to hurt the museums as well. I'm going to skip this video. I am going to show you this video. So moving essentially to another topic. You guys hear the audio, I'm assuming? If not, say yes. Or if not, say so. If you do hear it, no need to say anything. So this is a college football coach, Alabama coach. He smashed the second place trophy that his team won to make a point about how there's this growing sentiment. Young people these days, they don't understand hard work. They want a trophy just for doing nothing. There's an expression that's become popular. There's no trophy for second place. And this coach made a point of smashing this trophy to show his team that they were not worthy of recognition because they were not first place, which of course is very problematic. If you haven't, I didn't have time to include information here, but if you haven't read about how hard college athletes work, just on their athletics, they work incredibly hard to get to where they are, and to get second place. I don't know how many I don't follow sports. I don't know how many teams competed in this roster this year where these guys got second place, but they were the second best out of, I'm assuming, 20 or 30 or more teams. And every one of those teams worked exceptionally hard. And here we are, because we think young people are lazy. We told those really hardworking college students that they don't deserve any recognition. And the reality of it is, when has second place not been worthy of recognition? You know, if you're the second best person at your job, you still get a paycheck, right? You still get a bonus, maybe even. You don't get fired, right? Nobody comes and cleans out your desk and says, you were second best in the office. Get the heck out of here. You're the second best astrophysicist in this state or in this country. What's wrong with you? You're useless. Have we ever said that? That's preposterous. And of course, second place trophy has become an analog for the notion of just getting general second place or getting recognition for not being first place. But here's the Olympics in 1932, the Olympics in 1936, where the first place winner, of course, was black, and behind him are Nazis. The Nazis got second place, got recognition for second place. And here is the 1968, the famous fist in the air. I forget what if there's a specific term, but for a long, long time, we've been recognizing people in second place.
That was Black Power.
Yes. Yeah, and that, I meant to include links on those as well. They're separate issues, of course, the Nazism and the fist that these guys were raising to essentially protest racism. But, and part of the point I'm making here is that you'll see in the end, as we're laying as we're saying these things against young people, it's starting to bleed into other demographics as well. These are, of course, older things. These are not specific examples of how it's bleeding into those demographics, but I'll show those later. But yeah, as far as I can tell, we recognize second and third place so often that it's been done in the Olympics for as long as it goes. Oh, and I use 1932 as the first one because that is considered, from what I've read, the first modern Olympics of kind of, of our time. So essentially, as long as we've been giving out trophies and prizes, we've been recognizing second and third place. So why it is that now all of a sudden young people don't deserve recognition for hard work that gets them towards the top but not the top. I'm not sure. That seems unjustified. I'm going to show you some data, and as I mentioned with like the narcissistic personality inventory, much of the claims that have been made here, when it comes to the data, they've either had bad data, poorly analyzed data, have offered very little data at all, or just no data whatsoever. And you get 20 points if you understand why this particular meme means no data. So what does the data show us? Here's a quote against young people and how terrible they are. The children now love luxury. They have bad manners, contempt for authority. They show disrespect for elders and love chatter in place of exercise. Children are now tyrants, not the servants of their households. They no longer rise when elders enter the room. They contradict their parents, chatter before company, gobble up dainties at the table, cross their legs, oh, that's so bad, and tyrannize their children. And of course, I'm sure lots of you recognize the quote from Socrates, which, to give credit where credit was due, it was Evelise who posted this in Stephen's talk about UBI last week or the week before. And I know that a lot of people know this. What I saw in the text when this was posted suggested that people are fairly familiar with this notion, or with this quote, and the fact that it suggests that, again, this generation war has been going on for a long time and is kind of illegitimate. So what does data show us about what's going on? According to, some sources that are more reputable than what I would say are the ones against millennials, who mostly seem to be opinions, again, with bad data or no data. I'm using data from Department of Education, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and the Pew Research Institute, some others. So one of the claims is millennials are lazy, they don't want to work hard, they want to get free stuff. So here is the cost of college in today dollars. So this is adjusted for, I think, not only inflation, but the cost of living, if I remember correctly. I've included the source down there, so if you wanted to follow up with it, you can. But in 1985, college in today's dollars cost $55,000. Today, it costs 500% that, 5 times more, 26,000. So yeah, do millennials want free stuff? If by age 18, they're already looking at taking on more loans than any previous generation did before they even start adulthood. I know I have student loans. I know most of my colleagues and cohorts of my age, my cousins, and this is for bachelor's degrees, average for public and private institutions, not to mention, graduate degrees, masters, PhDs, etc., which this is from Pew Research. It shows not only do millennials have more degrees, which is to say more millennials are paying 500% what previous generations were paying. I think one of the next slides shows that they, not only that, but yeah, they also, there's just a rise in how many degrees they have. So this is the change from 2000, which is red, to 2018, which is the blue. And so as you can see, the number of doctorates, and of course this includes previous generations as well, but especially Generation X was probably getting degrees, and a lot of boomers, baby boomers, were also going back to school because it's become just ubiquitous, right? For a lot of people, a bachelor's degree is just not enough to either stay in their job or to get promoted or get a raise. So you can see doctoral rates have doubled. Professional degrees, I'm not sure exactly what those entail, but they've gone up by about 50%. Master's degrees have doubled, and bachelor's degrees have gone up by about 50% as well. And these will probably be even higher for the younger millennials who are not in this statistic because they were either not in college or not yet getting advanced degrees. Are millennials lazy? So this is statistics about millennials in the workforce compared to, or about generations in the workforce. And it's actually broken down by gender, which I think also makes a good point and is part of the point that I want to make. So you can see for males, not in the labor force for millennials is actually a little bit higher for males and females. And part of that is because how millennials have struggled to get jobs. But you can see millennials in the workforce are either the same, pretty similar for men, or higher for women, which again, part of my point has been that this prejudice against millennials bleeds into other demographics. So when we say millennials are lazy and don't want to work, millennial females are in the workforce in record numbers. And I think we're essentially failing to recognize that, specific other demographics, including millennial females and whatnot, are actually working a lot harder, because not only are they now in the workforce, but they're still holding much of those household duties that they were. Males have taken some, but definitely not, it hasn't become 50-50. So the millennial women are going to work, and then they're coming home, cleaning, cooking, raising the children, and that's not even covered in the statistic. This is just whether or not they have jobs. So unrelated article, if you want to check it out, Why Are Americans Spending Too Much Time at Work? Just about the zeitgeist of how we're just working more hours and, too much essentially, which is to say people have definitely not gotten lazier. People are working a lot more. And then according to this statistic, this chart was made using statistics from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. You can see corporate profitability. The start point is 1950. The end point, I think, was like 2018-ish. Corporate profitability has skyrocketed. And I put up here at the top this question: if corporate profitability has gone up so much, shouldn't the value of the labor have gone up, since that labor is yielding such greater profits? And then at the bottom, there's this link from Market Watch that says real wages effectively declined in 2018, according to figures released this month from PayScale, which is a local company that tracks wage data nationally. They track it not just in Seattle, but they're a Seattle-based company. So if corporate profitability has gone up, I mean, I don't know, a lot. Astronomical amounts. Why is it that, according to, this is Moody's Analytics from the New York Times, why is it that, okay, sure, the stock market has gone up, but why is it that since 2000 compared to 2018, household net worth has gone down? If everybody, millennials and other generations, frankly, are working more, have more degrees, and their labor is yielding greater profits for the corporations that they work for, why is it that their worth has gone down? And so again, this I think is pretty clear evidence that millennials and other generations are not lazy. Here's a good one. So I'm not advocating Medium as necessarily a top source of news. I think a lot of people do like it. I'm not saying it's good or bad. The author claimed to have made this chart using statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the government. And this is a comparison of how in the red, GDP has skyrocketed since the 40s. Meanwhile, minimum wage as a percentage of GDP has gone down significantly, which again makes no sense. And so when young people are getting their jobs at the age of 16, 18, 20, those jobs are often paid minimum wage so they can pay for that college, which costs 500% of what it used to. Meanwhile, their real income earned is, I don't know, a tenth of what it was for previous generations, which again just makes absolutely no sense. Data aside, as I mentioned, these prejudices are bleeding into other demographics as well. There are untold battles of the generation wars, which means there are untold victims as well. We're using prejudice against millennials and young people not only to hurt them, but we're using it to hurt other demographics as well, and justifying it via this mechanism of belief that young people are lazy and don't deserve the things that, as far as we can tell, previous generations did have, like affordable college and living wages. This is what I referring to as intersectional prejudice. And here's a quote to kind of demonstrate the consequences of intersectional prejudice. You might be familiar with this. Martin Niemöller, 1946, i.e. World War II era or post-World War II, right around the end of World War II. He says, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. And I think this makes a really good point about, you know, when you see other people being hurt, especially when those people are not like you, they're of other demographics in terms of race, gender, age, and you see them being pushed down by society as a whole, especially like the government or the system or the hegemony, and you don't speak out about it, you really got to ask, once they are done hurting those people and taking from them everything they can, what makes you think they're not going to come for you and your friends? And I think history has often showed us that that does happen. And here's another quote that is, all that's necessary for triumph to evil, or all that's necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing. This quote is attributed to Burke. It was disputed. Other people said it's, you know, various other people. So I just put that in there in case anybody wants to write hate mail about how I got that wrong. Doesn't matter who said it. The point is that it's true. And I would, you know, say we want to ask ourselves, if I'm a good person and I stand by and do nothing in the face of evil, then how is it that I'm defining myself as a good person? What does it mean to be a good person? And a big part of this is fear. Tell me once I hit play if you don't hear the audio. If you do hear the audio, there's no need to say anything. 1, 2, 3. Oh, dang it. Does it not play in presentation? Well, maybe it doesn't play. There we go.
Everyone creates the thing they dread. Men of peace create engines of war. Invaders create avengers. People create smaller people. Children. I lost the word there. Children. Designed to supplant them, to help them.
That's where you've come.
So if you didn't quite catch everything he said, everyone creates the thing they dread. Men of peace create engines of war. Invaders create avengers. People create smaller people. Children. I lost the word there. Children. Designed to supplant them, to help them end. And I think we often have this fear about how the next generation is doing better than us, and we're getting towards the end of, you know, whether it's the end of our prime of our life, or the end of our career, or the end of our life in general. And we often, it's very easy to look back and say, oh man, these kids these days have it so much easier. And I think that can create some resentment towards them. I've even had friends who have chronic illnesses, who, you know, had to have procedures, who they had to do it 10 years ago, and now they look at it and go, oh my God, people who get this procedure done now have it so much better than I had it. And yeah, that really sucks, but we don't want to hate those people for having it better than us. Isn't that kind of the point of society, is to make it better every year or every decade or every generation? Otherwise, haven't we kind of failed? If young people, if those younger than us aren't doing better than us, doesn't that mean that we've essentially failed, is kind of what I would say. And so that that clip was excuse me, was from Age of Ultron. And I think Ultron embodies this Frankenstein's monster sort of concept, where sometimes we create something, we deem it a monster because perhaps it reflects our greatest fears, perhaps it reflects our own faults, and then we call it a monster. But in demonizing someone else or attacking someone else, it could be argued, doesn't that in turn make us the monster when we let hate take over our actions and let us decide to, supplant others and take away their resources and take away their ability to provide for themselves? Here's a post that a friend of mine made 4 years ago now. What's that? Okay. I won't read the whole thing. Long story short, if you're a speed reader, go through it while I talk. His kid was in his driveway. He heard yelling and screaming and came out to see that an adult was screaming, get this thing away from me. Don't let it touch me. And that thing was his baby, his child daughter, who this person apparently thought was a monster and didn't want it anywhere near her. And I'm going to take this with a grain of salt. He may or may not have exaggerated some of the story. Of course, he's a parent, and his, instincts to protect his child are kicking in. So psychology shows us that we don't always remember things exactly the way they went. But nonetheless, someone, for some reason, was scared of his child in the driveway of his house, which says something about people being afraid of youth. It's almost, it's anecdotal. It's not that everyone in the streets is screaming every time they see a child, but I think it acts as an analog to kind of show the greatest, the highest high of this sort of fearing other people. And again, we see this happen with like people who might have fear of other races, who see them, the old, I saw a person of color in the streets while I was driving and I locked my car doors just in case. These sort of things that do take place in real life. Our last movie quote, the me, me, me. This is from the Matrix. I think it was the second. It might have been the third Matrix, but I think Smith here, Agent Smith, is a really good stand-in to represent hegemonies, essentially those who have power and seek to control the actions of others. And if you don't control, either essentially, if I'm in charge, you've got to join me one way or another by force. And I think hegemonies kind of seek to undermine the ability of other people to kind of think a different way. And then hegemony wants to replicate itself. Everyone's going to have to join the party or perish, essentially, as you saw with Smith, where he turned the other person into him. And it's me, me, me. And I think that's a good, I think, analog for how saying how people of other demographics are not as good as my demographic, that is inherently narcissistic. Me, me, me. If they're not like me, they're not good. So in accusing those people of being narcissistic, it's like you're engaging in narcissism yourself if and when you do it. And then some good examples of intersectional prejudice that we have seen. So young people, we've kept minimum wage down. Some of the arguments against it that I've heard are, well, young people don't need the money, and it's young people who work minimum wage jobs, right? These are entry-level jobs. And not only is that hurting young people, but then older people who, because of other economic decisions we've made, are unable to retire, are now working those minimum wage jobs as well. So not only are young people suffering because of us justifying not raising real wages, because we feel that young people don't need them or don't deserve them because they're lazy and entitled. And you can see this is a good example of how it's hurting other demographics. And of course, behind her is a Black person, and Black people of color, tend to work more low-wage jobs as well. So it's hurting not just baby boomers and older people and retiree types, but it's hurting people of color in addition to younger people. Here's a good one that says, it's a picture of a hipster with tattoos and a beard, which is very hot right now with like my generation and people younger than me. And it says, if you have a beard but you can't change your tire, originally at the bottom it said shave, and then someone who presumably was a hipster millennial said, rock that beard and call AAA. Crappy masculine stereotypes suck. And the comment at the bottom here says, if you have a beard and can't change a tire, what have you been doing with your life? As if changing a tire is tantamount to the success you've earned in life. And really this is, and how this is intersectional prejudice, because not only is it against the culture of young people and the way that they choose to look in terms of their facial hair or even their head hair. A lot of people are dyeing their hair and shaving half of it and whatnot. But this is advocating for hypermasculinity and toxic masculinity, which of course only naturally is likely to lead to misogyny and sexism. So essentially we're advocating for these hypermasculine men who need to be changing tires, because that apparently is what makes a man, and that is problematic itself, not just for young people, but for, I think, non-males and non-hypermasculine, non-toxic masculine males as well. This is from someone that I know who's a teenager, posted on Facebook a few years ago. When you get dress coded for showing your shoulders, I mean, what's so sexy about someone's shoulders? Are boys going to be so distracted that they can't work? Oh my God, I'm done. Oh my God, I can't. I'm done with school. If you don't know what it means to get dress coded, she's using that as a colloquialism to mean that she got sent home from school because she violated dress code for showing her shoulders, presumably wearing a tank top, a camisole, something with straps. Possibly her, bra is showing. Oh my God. So we have to send a young woman home, deny her an education, in order to set an example for young people that they just can't behave this way, that this is deemed to be out of line. And of course, this is, again, not only hurting young people, but specifically females, young females. This is being used as justification to control female bodies and the way female bodies are presented. And also, one of the comments in this was, I didn't include it, but it was, if you send a young woman, or a girl, a teenage girl home for her body being too sexualized, isn't that kind of your problem, that you're seeing a teenage girl's body as being sexual? Like you can't handle it. So that is an interesting point. You can think about it on your own. If you're not familiar with this, push out the criminalization of Black girls in school. So young Black females are getting kicked out of school for, again, the U word, their behavior, which is deemed out of line. And studies are showing that the behaviors they're exhibiting are no worse or along the same lines as the behaviors exhibited by the young white females, and yet the Black ones are the ones that get kicked out of school, again, denied education. So we're using this whole, young people these days have no respect sort of prejudice to disproportionately kind of adjudicate, disproportionately discipline and punish people of specific demographics, largely people of color and people who are Black. And same goes for Black boys. This is hard to see, but essentially a Black school-age boy being dragged out of school by a police officer. And this is another thing, you may have heard the expression, the criminalization of Black boys, or the prison, did I include it? No, I didn't. The school to prison pipeline is what it's being called, where young Black people and young people of color, because they're acting out of line, but not more out of line than other young people, are going to prison straight out of school. And part of it is, again, this prejudice that young people these days have a bad attitude and that we have to punish them. And again, it's being disproportionately laid against specific demographics of young people. So these prejudices are bleeding into...
What's your point?
Excuse me?
Go on. Sorry. I talked to somebody else.
Okay. I will end with this. I'm not advocating for this article as a whole, but I just thought this line summed up my point about when we look to scapegoat, and when we look at the behaviors of others and try to lay all or much of society's problems at their feet, at the feet of demographics which are not our own. And this quote says, financial crises induced misery, boosted far right-wing voting in interwar Germany being Germany between World War I and World War II. And I believe this article was looking at Germany around 1931 to 33. In towns and cities where many firms were exposed to failing banks, Nazi votes surged. In particular, places exposed to the one bank led by A Jewish chairman registered particularly strong increases of support. Scapegoating Jews was easier with seemingly damning evidence of their negative influence. And that seemingly damning evidence is that there was one bank that had a Jewish chairman. So you're probably familiar with, World War I and kind of World War II, of how Germany was heavily sanctioned post-World War I. This, arguably with other factors, led to a depression in Germany, bad economy in Germany, and the way that Nazism and Hitler rose to power was to say that they will fix the economy. Stop me if this sounds familiar in the modern era. And they said that in order to fix the economy, they've identified who the problem is, and we're going to go after those people in that era being Jews. In other eras, perhaps this has happened. You might be thinking of certain times and certain leaders who have said similar things, which is not to say that other times were as bad or worse than, say, World War II or the Holocaust. I'm not here to compare one-to-one ratios of who had it bad or who's had it worse. But the point is that when we start looking for scapegoats, we find them, and then it leads into the oppression of people. And we have seen that over and over again throughout history.